Welcome, everybody. We are so thrilled that you have decided to join us today. For those of you I haven't met, as we say in Zoom world before, I'm Lisa Koenigsberg, and I'm the founder of Initiatives in Art and Culture. And I am welcoming you to the third of our 2021 webinar series. The idea for this was, if you will, a child of COVID. We began doing them last July and have been very gratified by the engagement and response. And so we are committed to you forever. And this week, in a sense, is a follow-on to something that we did in September of 2020. It was called Words Matter. And in response to that, it was called to our attention that there are a good many words to which we should devote an entire webinar. And the number one ranked choice was the word transparency. So, full disclosure, that is what brings us here. A little procedural issue, which is for those of you that want to ask questions. There is, to the right of what you are, that image, which is us, there is an opportunity to type questions in. Please do so. And please don't hold back. If you have a question at the beginning, send it, because they come through, and so we can be sure that we get to all the questions. So we encourage you early and often, should you so wish. And now I'm going to introduce our panelists, and I'm extraordinarily thrilled to have the pleasure to do so. In textual order, and that's what determined it, Ronnie van der Linden, who is the gentleman with the 9/11 memorial background. Ronnie has been deeply engaged in every aspect of the diamond business, both in the United States and abroad. He has been president, or is former president, of organizations, among them DMIA, USJC. He serves on the board of the 24 Karat Club, is also on the 47th Street Bid District, which is important, and involved with the World Diamond Council. But more than that, he is simply incomparable. He is Ronnie. Next, Sarah Yude is Deputy General Counsel. She's wearing a lovely green. Sarah is Deputy General Counsel at the Jewelers Vigilance Committee, or what you will hear as JVC. And she's an attorney admitted in the state of New York with extensive experience in legal compliance. And the full bios for all of these people appear on the site, so I'm not going to go through them. I'm going to suggest that you refer to them. I will, however, mention that she is extremely active in the Women's Jewelry Association and is on the Standards Committee of the Responsible Jewelry Council. Mark Hanna is Chief Marketing Officer of Richline Group, which is a Berkshire Hathaway company. And during his 5 years, etc., in the jewelry industry, he has had experience in every aspect of it and has been honored as one of America's top 200 CMOs, and also received the CMO Club's highest award for corporate social sustainability. And on a personal note, has meant such a great deal to me over the past 15 years, during which I have learned so much. Lisa Bridge is president and CEO of Benbridge Jeweler, a Berkshire Hathaway subsidiary. Lisa is remarkable. She is the 5th generation of the company, and she both honors the heritage of Benbridge while driving it forward. And when I first met Lisa, she was vice president for education. Lisa she designs a jewelry line, the Lisa Bridge line, and engages in an extremely vigorous way with the entire Benbridge team, which is another form, if you will, of transparency. So I am really thrilled to have her with us today. And she serves on the board of Jewelers for Children and the advisory board of Black in Jewelry Coalition. And she has been on, or she still is on, the executive board of the American Gem Society, AGS, and previously chaired the education committee. So we have a stellar bunch. And so I'm going to give you a reminder about the questions, and then our tech guru, without whom we would be lost, is going to do a screen share of some images that we'd like to share with you before we get going. Hugo?
Apologies, Lisa, the system seemed to...
So, Mark, do you want to say anything, or shall we just go through these slides?
Just a little something that just pulled together a couple of slides to kind of kick this off with the idea of just how important transparency is in so many different ways, in so many different disciplines in every part of the world. That the two pretty well-known, much more influential people than we could ever hope to be talking about transparency here and the importance of it from two different points of view. So, and I happen to love both these quotes. So
they're fabulous. I love the equation of it's the relationship to vulnerability.
Yeah, and also on the do it anyway. I mean, I think this is an incredibly important concept, that it might be costly, it might be difficult, it might strain, everything from your personality to your pocketbook, but do it anyway. So. And the idea of a glass house, I think it's a great concept. Looking at it from a company and a corporate point of view, that every part of what you do needs to be integrated into responsible practices and the pursuit of responsible practices. You can't just do a little something over here, a little something over there. It has to be holistic. And I always think that the idea of a glass house, and this is a beautiful one, really is the most visual concept in terms of the idea of being a transparent company in every way. Next. Then it comes down to taking this, as again, we all know, once you start on this mission, so much to do, so much to look at, so many things. So it really brings in the concept of focus. It brings in the concept of relevance and materiality. What's really important to you personally and to your company? What's the most important things? And then prioritize them, and then try to really see yourself in the way that other people see you, see yourself in the way you want to be seen. And that really is seeing the forest through the trees. Next. So I'm not going to spend much time on this, just the red part, right? That, you know, to me, the greatest made up word of the last decade is trustability. And it did come out of a book from Peppers and Rogers called Extreme Trust. And I didn't make it up. I wish I did. But the idea of trustability starts with transparency. You're never going to be a trustable company. You're never going to have that kind of global feeling of ethics and proper conduct and best practices unless you start with it being transparent. So, and yes, it starts with information, and communication is going to be a big part of this. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that throughout the panel. Next. So last but not least, 2020, I don't know what to say about it. There's a lot of webinars about post-pandemic. I'd love to know when that's going to be. But I think that, to me, most important words are lives and livelihoods and health and family. And you know, we were talking a little earlier about how relationships have gotten stronger, relationships have changed, relationships have been situations where people have not seen themselves in a long time, but yet we've grown stronger. So it comes from strength. Resilience has become a word that it's probably been the most used word since millennial in a long time, and it's really true. So from there, Lisa, I'll take it over to you.
Okay, fantastic. I'm going to add to those words and say, and just throw in a third, which is unprecedented. So I think that set the tone and created a framework beautifully. And what I thought would be an interesting approach here is to ask each one of our panelists, from your vantage point, how do you define the word transparency? And how does that definition impact your professional actions and decisions? And I thought perhaps, Sarah, we could start with you.
Sure. I'm not going to give you the legal definition of transparency today. I certainly could. I have a Black's Law Dictionary right there. But I didn't think that was really what I wanted to get across when thinking about the word and how it operates in the legal sense. To me, transparency is being clear and not just about the good stuff, right? So there's all of these times where we want to say to consumers who are buying our jewelry, or even to other businesses that are buying our jewelry, here are all these wonderful attributes about these pieces that we want to tell you about. But there are always material things that are important to people and businesses buying jewelry that are maybe not always the best things that you want to communicate. But going back to what Mark said, it's, you know, it is about communicating clearly the attributes of your product, even when maybe it's going to hurt you a little bit, or maybe it's going to take some time or some money or some resources to make sure that your consumer or whoever is purchasing your goods really understands the product. So to me, being clear and not just about the good stuff.
Okay, Mark?
I'm going to segue that because, you know, in looking at it, I think the word, as Sarah points out, is clarity. I think that if you relate the word clarity to everything you're doing, it says that you're going to be upfront. You're going to be honest about what you're doing. Yes, you are going to communicate, and you're going to do it in a way where people can understand. This is not the, if you can't convince them, confuse them time in our lives and in our world. And so, yeah, I completely agree with what Sarah said. I think that starting with the idea of clarity in all we do, again, aimed at the goal of trust in who we are and how people not just perceive us, but have enough information about us to know that we're real.
Lisa?
Well, I almost turn transparency into a verb, into an action, and think about transparency really as a mindset of action, of this constant process, because transparency, I don't think, is one moment, but it's this journey that we're on to continually improve. And it's being part of the decision-making process and a lens that we use for every decision that we make. That transparency isn't just in one moment, but continuing to move to create more transparency and continuing to move to continue to make that process cleaner and clearer, and sharing it more broadly. So I think that it's a process more than just a one moment, that journey.
And Ronnie?
Hi there. So I'm going to have to agree. It starts out with clarity, as Mark and Sarah said, and mindset, as Lisa said. And I'm going to use the term openness because that's what transparency is about. It's about being open. So if we look at our industry and the transparency that has come along over the number of years, what are we looking at? We're looking at transparency as it pertains to sourcing, human rights, work ethics, to name a few. That's where we are. And when people ask a question that is a legitimate question, they're entitled to a legitimate answer about transparency. So if they're asking you how you source your merchandise, what kind of climate are your workers in, an environment in, they're entitled to know these things. They're not entitled to know our business secrets, for instance, who are, suppliers and different things that we're engaged with. But I think transparency has a lot to do with being open, being very open when you're asked a question. So I like it. I think between the four of us here, we've covered it.
Well, it certainly set the framework for the questions to come. So, Sarah, obviously one of the things that we all think about is the FTC and their role. So I'm wondering, given what you all have said, since the FTC is an arbiter with respect to advertising and representation and so many other elements of what make a thing within our world, what is the difference in this context between transparency and truth?
Sure. So just in case there's anyone who is unfamiliar with the FTC, it stands for the Federal Trade Commission. It is a federal agency that regulates interstate trade in the United States. And, they have a very, very broad mission, which is essentially to ensure that trade is fair, both to businesses and to consumers in the US, to make sure that businesses are not taking unfair advantages over others. And there's a number of laws that they essentially, implement in the United States. When it comes down to jewelry, there's a special set of advertising guidelines that apply to the jewelry industry. And the reason that these exist is because for many, when they're making jewelry purchases, it's a very significant purchase and they are fairly uneducated consumers. For many, the first jewelry purchase that they make is an engagement ring, and people are coming in with very, very little knowledge of the industry and our terminology. So the FTC really sets out, how we can make sure that we're advertising in a way that does not confuse or deceive consumers. So to me, the FTC, I think, looks at the difference between transparency and truth. So, at the risk of being a little pedantic, truth is about facts. Transparency is about selection of which facts you're going to say to the consumer, right? So that's really how the FTC divides those two things. It is it's not just saying, okay, this is gold. Sure, that's the truth. A product might be gold, but being transparent means saying this is 14 karat white gold and it's plated with rhodium. That's actually being transparent about the product. And that's how the FTC sort of makes those distinctions. There are facts about products, and then there are material facts that a consumer might want before making a decision to purchase a product.
Well, actually, there is a follow-on question I have for that. I thought it would come later, but can you comment on the relationship between the word gold and transparency? Given the FTC's guides for the jewelry, precious metals, and pewter industries allow this precious metal to contain significant amounts of alloys and still retain its name. And everybody, please feel free to chime in on each other's answers.
Yes. So what Lisa's referring to is in the most recent revision of the FTC guides, the FTC declared that instead of keeping the previous floor of 10 karat gold, you are allowed to call lower carat alloys gold so long as you disclose the amount of gold that is in the alloy. This is in response to a number of products that had arrived on the market that had some precious metals in them, but they were not at the threshold where you could call it out. And some companies, commented to the FTC saying, hey, you're restricting our speech by not allowing us to call this product gold when there's gold in it. The FTC, being a federal agency, has to balance the consumer protection that it does with the First Amendment, which says that government should not restrict speech except in very certain circumstances. And so I think this decision was really threading the needle, saying, okay, yes, companies can say that there is, 6 carats of gold in this alloy. And really that is, it's balancing between giving consumers truthful information. And I think, a lot of people would argue devaluing carat gold, which I also agree with. As the JVC lawyer, I don't take a lot of positions on these kinds of things. Our job really is to explain and what the laws are and give people guidance and education on how to follow them. This one, I think, was just, again, really trying to toe the line between, commercial speech and consumer protection.
I wonder, Mark, if you have any thoughts on that you'd like to share. You're on mute.
Getting myself in trouble. I think there's already a wanted poster in the lobby of the FTC. The one thing I agree with in terms of the concept of the word transparency is if you call it 1 carat, then you've told the truth, if that's what it really is. From there on in, I think it's leading to a misconception of gold. I think it's leading to a degradation of the brand carat gold, which I think has come to mean something very special, both emotionally and in terms of the amount of gold being a significant amount, that product actually is primarily gold or to a large extent gold. So I think here is a case where I like Sarah's through the needle, but using the definition of transparency about the composition of the product called gold and allowing 1 carat, I think it's overstepping the bounds of believing that transparency and integrity are exactly the same thing. So I said, I'll get myself in trouble for this, but I'm not a believer in 1 carat gold, and I'm not a believer in the FTC's ruling that allows, particularly as a marketer, the very important brand carat gold to be downgraded.
Yeah, I don't want you to be alone, Mark. I'll get in trouble with you because I couldn't agree with Mark more. And people are going to use it falsely, as we know they have already. Mark stated very well. It's now become ingredients rather than gold to me. It's what alloys, as Sarah was mentioning, are combined with gold, but let's use the gold as the main seller of the product. I like
Yep.
your wanted poster down there. Keep up the good work, Mark.
Well, as someone who's deeply committed to gold, I share that thought, but nonetheless. Indeed. So to pivot from a very specific to a broader question, Lisa, what, in your view, who or what is the most important player or driver in the current emphasis on transparency?
Well, as a retailer, we listen to our customers, and we get a report card every day on how we're doing. You know, that our customers vote with their purchases, and they're really driving all of us to be better and to continue to grow our awareness and our focus in this area. That it's really understanding where jewelry comes from, where our gold comes from. That's really coming from our customers. And I think customers today are much more aware of what they're buying and want to make those purchases selectively and want to make a statement with them. You know, is what I'm purchasing having a positive impact? And they're wondering this whether or not they actually bring it up. I remember I was helping a friend with an engagement ring a couple of years ago, and I was helping him, and he said, well, I obviously was going to buy a diamond engagement ring, and I was going to buy from you, but my soon-to-be fiance just heard about your incredible trip to Botswana. And she was going on and on about the impact that you shared about what good diamonds are doing in Botswana and the incredible story. And I feel so much better about buying this ring now. And that really was a question in my mind, because I don't know if I would have asked it, but I'm really glad to know the answer. And so the customers really are driving this focus, because I think for so many years, we kind of just said, well, trust us, you know, we're the experts, we're taking care of everything. Just have that implicit trust. And I think today customers demand more of us, and they demand us proactively sharing our stories and proactively giving them the information, perfect or imperfect as it is. They expect us to be bringing that forward and are driving the conversation. And so we have to live up to the expectations of our customers and all along the supply chain.
Well, a follow-on question to that is, I wonder if you could tell us what, from your perspective, are the best ways or best tools to use to ensure a shared sense of transparency throughout the supply chain?
Well, it really begins with knowing who your partners are. And it starts with having an alignment of values from the very beginning. And I think if you don't start with that, start with knowing who you're working with, then you've already lost. You know, having those clear expectations written, you know, in a vendor packet, having them be very explicit at the beginning, but also having those checks and balances along the way to make sure that those partnerships are living up to what you've established at the beginning. So for us, that's we visit in person. When we're traveling around the world, we like to visit our partners, both because it's really good for our partnership. You know, it's a sign of respect to want to see their facilities, but also then we know they really are making what they say they are. Here's what the conditions are. Here's what it looks like. And that's really important. It is the trust but verify. And so it's, you know, making sure that what we're representing is what it is. It's our quality control department. And so every piece of diamond and gemstone jewelry and gold jewelry that comes through us, all gets checked under 10 power magnification by a trained gemologist. It's now also all checked in for lab grown diamonds. And so as that became an issue a few years ago, we instituted 2 different machines within our facility to check for lab grown diamonds, to work with our partners to make sure that they also had the appropriate systems in place. Not taking their word for it. We hope that they did, but also saying exactly what are you doing, and making sure that we see that they are, because ultimately it's our name on the door. And so what we're representing our jewelry as to our customers, we have to be able to stand behind. And so it's that partnership from the very beginning through every step along the way to make sure we are doing the right thing for our customers.
So Ronnie, I was wondering, sort of using Lisa's example of the Botswana ring, the stone, the ring with the Botswana stone. What is the role of the word transparency in your determination that a stone is a magnificent diamond?
Knowing your supply chain, it's bottom line for us in the diamond industry. So for those of us that are members of the Responsible Jewelry Council, been audited by the Responsible Jewelry Council, working with the Signet Diamond Sourcing Protocol, or Tiffany's Diamond Source Warranty that's out there. It's basically what Lisa said. It's, trust but verify, and that's what's being done. So most of us, you'd like to expect that the industry, you can trust the industry. The greater percentage of the industry you can trust. It's always that one lousy bad apple that gives us all a bad name, which we're trying to eliminate. Not as easy as we'd like it all to be, but I would say that you really have to know your supply chain. I think Lisa said it extremely well. It's know your partners, know who you're doing business with. Once you've got that and you have that trust and that verification, I think everything else just lines up. Actually, I know everything lines up. It's not a thinking.
And I'll just jump in to say that, this is all part of a compliant anti-money laundering program, which most jewelers need to have. And if you have an AML program, you have the basic framework to start asking these questions of your vendors and to make sure that you understand where your products are coming from, which is vitally important.
And if you want to do banking in the United States, you better have that AML program in place or they're shutting your accounts down.
So I'm going to pivot on the stone, but keep our focus there and ask Lisa, what in your view is the relationship between clarity as an attribute in a stone? So say that Botswana stone that was sold, and transparency with regard to the diamond chain.
Well, we think about clarity, and often in a diamond, we're searching for the cleanest diamond, for the one with the least inclusions. But those inclusions are also identifiers. They also share that this diamond is natural. And what's so extraordinary about a diamond is that it came from nature. Billions, literally billions of years ago, deep within the earth. What else do we have that came from so deep in the earth? And so that's a fingerprint within that diamond. And so I think transparency in the same way, being able to share, as Sarah said, both the good and also the things that we're working on and things that we want to improve, add value to the information, because it says this is real, this is authentic. It says that, okay, we're not perfect, but we're on the journey. It almost makes it more valuable. Sometimes there are those inclusions in a diamond that make it that much more valuable. We had a diamond that had a kyanite crystal in it recently, which, all the nerdy gemologists were all very excited about. But sometimes those natural inclusions make it more valuable and more interesting. And I think so too, in sharing our story, we can share some of the challenges we've had in the past, some of the improvements, but I think that also lends credibility and clarity to where we're going and where we are today.
Each diamond has its own fingerprint. Exactly what Lisa's saying.
I was actually going to follow on with a question for you, Ronnie, related to this, which is that there are both traditional definitions of diamonds, such as one of which and then there are presently standards under development for, quote, sustainable diamonds that address both lab-grown and natural stones. And I wonder what role source and origin should play in the true definition of diamonds.
Great question. Great question. The only problem is I heard you from the sustainability on. I didn't hear the beginning of your question because you unfortunately went out. So if you can just give me the short version.
Sure.
So
what I was doing was going from the traditional 4 C's as the way of defining a diamond to evolution or development. I mean, I want to use a value-free term, evolution of terminology that for defining diamonds. And there is a current term, sustainable diamonds, that is to address both lab grown and natural stones. And so I wanted to ask you, what role should source and origin play in the true definition of diamonds?
okay, so we have been working on, and Sarah knows about this, terms, and I am going to refer to that to answer your questions. All right. So for example, sustainably sourced. All right. And perfect that you're asking me this because I happen to have it here. Sourced in a manner that verifiably provides enduring socioeconomic benefits and environmental protection and longevity. Then we have sustainable materials. Materials that have been recovered, produced, or manufactured by companies that verifiably provide enduring socioeconomic benefits and environmental protection and longevity across the entire value chain. And that is where we are when we talk about sustainably sourced. That applies to everyone. And that is where when we talk about the materials, whether it's a diamond, it has to do with today, the environment. We look at obviously huge discussions between, and I really don't want to get in this, but between the lab grown industry and the diamond industry when it comes to being sustainably sourced. Diamonds, natural diamonds today, are sourced far different than they were decades ago. And that's where, you know, as Lisa was saying earlier about the good stories that need to be told, whether it's Botswana or other diamond communities out there, that's what's so important to us, that we, and by the way, that's part of being, again, compliant and transparent when it comes to sourcing. That's part of the whole pipeline. That's part of the whole, what we need to address as an industry, not as only the diamond industry, but as the community, those from all the way down to the retailers, to from producers to retailers, excuse me. So I don't know if I answered it. I mean, of course, there's definitions for ethically sourced as well.
I'm actually going to
And
ask you
responsibly sourced.
a follow-on, if I may, because what I was trying to get at, and so I mean, what you've said is absolutely wonderful. I'd like to just hone in on something, which is how important is source and origin in the definition of diamond?
Now I'm clearer. Thank you. All right. So it depends what your definition of origin is. Okay. If you're looking at origin from the mine, or you're looking at origin from the middle market, it's important. Okay. But we also have today, for lack of a better word, even though I don't like it, recycled diamonds that come back into the industry. So you don't know the actual original origin of the diamond. There are those that are out there, and I think Lisa can better answer this, that may come behind the counter and ask for a specific diamond, whether they want it sourced from Botswana or they want it sourced from Canada. For the majority of sales that are made out there, okay, I have not been asked greatly about the origin of a diamond. How important is it? It's important to the person behind the counter. A diamond is a diamond by any other name. All right. As long as it is ethically sourced, Lisa, we're in great shape. Not necessarily having to know the origin. If people want to know the origin, and again, you know, Lisa, that is, you know, and request a Canadian or request a Botswana diamond or a Russian diamond, so be it. And they're entitled to it. But as far as I am in the middle market here, producing, Yeah, I sell things that I can't give you the actual origin of it, but I can tell you that it's ethically sourced.
Right. So question is, in your view, or
My view,
when defining diamond, it comes from the earth. Is there, in other words, what I'm struggling with is something that's it's a discussion out there, which is
Yes, it is.
saying that it is not, there's a set of standards that can be applied, and how this, if you will, thing we call love came into being is not necessarily part of its definition. And I think that's something that relates to transparency. So I was wondering what your thoughts are about that.
So I am a good question, and my thoughts personally about it. Again, I mean, I understand your concerns, and yes, it comes up. But that thing about love, I'm going to go back, and yes, it comes from the earth and billions of years ago, and I don't know that any other material out there lasts for a billion years, and then from there on, we have a past history that we've talked about in the diamond industry, but over the number of years, those products coming from the earth are equated with love, as long as we're not part of the problem. We're part of the solutions that we have. So you're asking me, do I still equate it to love? You're darn straight I do. Diamonds and love. You're asking me if the definition of a diamond is Mother Nature and sourced from the earth? Yes, it is. If you're asking me about the conflict side of diamonds, well, we've addressed that also, and hope that a lot of that material has been removed from the industry. But I don't know how to answer you as far as moving forward. Moving forward, I do know how to answer you as far as moving forward. Moving forward, we ethically source the material. So I'm a little, maybe somebody else here can address it a little differently than I do, but yes, I still equate diamonds and love, and will forever equate it that way.
And it would seem that you equate diamond as defined with having an origin in the earth.
I do, yes.
I raised this.
A diamond, not a lab-grown diamond. A diamond, as we know, is equated to natural diamonds.
I raised this because there are so many standards and definitions that are being developed. And one of the sort of core foci of this discussion is transparency. And so in transparency, how you use a word really does matter. So I'm wondering, I'd love to ask Lisa, given that how have you used storytelling, whether it's in material that's presented to the buyer, or even store design so that they can see process, but how do you use storytelling to align with this goal of transparency?
It's been an evolution and as we looked, we redesigned our stores a couple of years ago and have continued to evolve the concept. But in that store design, one of the things that we really tried to do was bring that storytelling forward, bring forward the stories of how jewelry and watches are made. I think for so many years, we put them into their neat little box, put them on a white display and said, here's this beautiful piece of jewelry. And there's so much that goes into creating them that we should bring forward. So, for example, in our store design, we brought our watchmakers forward. We're really proud of our watchmakers as part of our history. My great-great-grandfather was a watchmaker. And we ended up being in Seattle because he journeyed across the country, setting and maintaining pocket watches for train conductors. Seattle was the end of the line, so Seattle's where he set up shop. And today we still have just as many, if not more, watchmakers than any other retailer in the country. And so let's celebrate that heritage. Let's celebrate how these incredible small, miracles happen. And so we brought our watchmaker forward in what we call the Alchemy Lab. And so we brought them to the front of the store. And so you can see whether you're walking by or in the store, into the space, put all the tools right up front. And originally our watchmakers were quite nervous about, I'm going to be on display. What happens if I make a mistake? What happens if, I lose a screw? What happens? What do I do? And we said, that's okay. People have no idea what they're, whether or not you're doing it right or wrong. But B, it's interesting to see. And it's become such a focal point for us to be able to share the craftsmanship. And we did the same thing in other elements of the store. We introduced a curio cabinet in the store where we put gem specimens and tools and wax models. And we even put in a diamond polishing saw that Peter, our head of merchandise, schlepped back from a trip to Botswana. You can't get more authentic than here's the actual diamond polishing saw that was being used. But to be able to talk to those artifacts as you're talking about a beautiful piece of jewelry. And to be able to show that journey, to have a crystal, a gem crystal next to here's what the peridot looks like when it's rough, and here's what it looks like when it's polished, and here's what they had to work with. Telling those stories brings new meaning to the pieces of jewelry, lends an authenticity, and continues to perpetuate the fascination and the love of jewelry and watches.
So that, if you will, frontline transparency and interaction with the customer, which of course is critical because at the end of the day, we want people to make purchases and preferably be very happy with them and come back. That stems from arguably what one might call the corporate culture. And so I'm wondering, Mark, what is the most important element in achieving transparency in corporate culture?
Obviously, we're right back to the clarity word for one thing, but I think most importantly, it's we as leaders, we have responsibility from the top. And looking at the evolution of the importance of best practices and responsible practices that, myself as a chief marketing officer, my most important and really my foremost job is keeper of the corporate reputation. And, also along the way, you've got strategic responsibilities. So the keeper of the corporate reputation part is pretty clear to all of us just how important transparency, trustability, and so forth have grown in terms of helping contribute to your return, not just your return on investment, but your return on that responsibility model, where you're looking at growth of reputation, you look at corporate differentiation, you're looking at employee retention, that you built a new model of a company for the world that recognizes our responsibilities and recognizes the pursuit of ethics and proper conduct that we have to have. So, I sort of ended up starting from the marketing point of view, looking about what is it that we say, and what is it that we should be saying, and what is it that we could be saying, and then getting involved on the other side of it with the idea of looking at those returns on relationship and how could we make these strategic to the company, and then how would we go about it. So I think the culture becomes one of, first and most importantly, you've got to communicate. So it was as simple at the beginning when we did this, we set up something called Richline Responsible, which we communicated in every way we could, and we continued to grow, for our employees, for our associates, to really understand. We we set up the tagline to go with that, which was compliant by law, responsible by choice. And then we
Wonderful.
try to continue to add to the responsible by choice. So I think culture is showing your goals, showing your family values. I think Lisa talked about values before. Talk about your family values, set them clearly, communicate them, and hopefully you're going to bring people with you.
So with a follow-on question that perhaps gets both at clarity and a bit of murkiness, what is the relationship between such debates as that surrounding the term "Made in America" and transparency?
300 miles from Providence to DC. I think that, once again, we're talking about, let's throw the opposite word in, let's throw the misunderstanding word in, that there are many things, and Made in America is probably a decent example of it, where I see it often that a great deal of the industry is living in sin because of the idea that they thought it, they designed it, they built it, they sourced it, they put everything together, they did something completely, wherever, Seattle, New York, Providence, and feel that everything they've done is made in the USA. And yet we have guidelines which bring into the scope the materials. So, and I think somebody in one of your diamond examples, you talked earlier about where did the origin really come from? Well, by the FTC imposing origin of the materials in the USA, they've imposed an untenable requirement to know that the gold originated in the United States of America. Absolutely untenable. We all know all the gold that ever existed is still here, and it probably didn't all come out of the United States. So I think the biggest problem with the Made in USA law from the industry point of view is misunderstanding of just the level of definitive requirement that the FTC has placed on that. So if I take that over to transparency, I think, again, we have to worry about misconception of how it's used. And we have to worry, Ronnie said this a little earlier in a different way, we have to worry about it being used correctly by everyone, not just most of us. We've got to be sure that it's somehow not degraded by bad use of the word and misuse of the word. And we haven't used the word greenwashing and all that yet. Sarah came close to it earlier. So I guess I'll introduce a new word here, which is the idea of misconception. And it's our responsibility as industry leaders in every one of these things, as much as we can, to try to create that clarity, try to create that transparency of the truth. And what do these things really stand for? What do they really mean? What are really the rules, guidelines, and bumpers that come with them?
Is compliance, I'm just going to really hone in on this. The term "Made in America" as it is presently construed, is compliance possible?
Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. I mean, we actually have a program where we work together with mines in South Dakota and the Northwest. We work with a refiner in Salt Lake City. We do all our fabricating in Massachusetts, and we produce products that end up at retail. So can we do it? Yes, we can do it. Is it costly? Yes, it's costly with all the segregation and all the individual specific tracking along the way. But the more important thing to me is not can we do it, it's why should we have to do it with materials that I know there's an ability in the FTC to put an understanding in a more correct way. So we could say manufactured in Rhode Island, gold from God. Is that okay, Sarah, if I say that? But some type of qualification, understanding that you may not have the source of gold exactly, and you can put that in.
No, understood. And it makes it makes a certain, if depending on how you want to source gold responsibly, it makes that also quite challenging.
I mean, yeah, we can get it on Made in USA forever, but the correct rule is the rule used worldwide, which is called substantial transformation, which means that you took something, the gold is your clay, you took something and made something from that into a consumer item where it was not in its original form. Substantial transformation is the correct concept. It's used every place except the United States. And here, even here, Customs uses it, but the FTC does not, so.
Sarah, you've been trying to fight that, haven't you? The JV.
Yeah, you know, we at JVC for many years, we have asked the FTC to reconsider it specifically in the context of recycled gold, to say, hey, you know, we know that it's pretty difficult in many circumstances to determine the origin of gold, especially when it's been refined. We know, however, that, you know, there's all of this recycled gold and it's happening inside the United States. And perhaps maybe could we allow Made in USA when we know that we're using gold that was recycled in the United States? And the answer was no. So, you know, we'll continue to bring that up. And it's, you know, it's an interesting conflict amongst the agencies when we talk about this. So as Mark pointed out, of course, Customs uses substantial transformation to determine origin of products that you import into the United States. So for example,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. So, you know, for example, if you have a diamond that was mined, you know, in Botswana, but then it was cut and polished in Surat in India, you know, that becomes an origin India product for the purpose of customs because it was substantially transformed by cutting and polishing it. However, if you took that diamond from Surat and then set it in a piece of jewelry in Italy, it is still India origin for the diamond because setting is not considered substantial transformation. It's pretty complicated. But then, of course, there's a conflict between the Federal Trade Commission's definition of Made in USA, where they don't accept gold recycled in the United States, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, which for the purpose of Dodd-Frank compliance does consider gold recycled in the United States to be USA origin and therefore exempt from the disclosure rules from Dodd-Frank. It is, you know, I could say a lot about how complicated federal agencies and federal law is, but in this instance, I think it's a very interesting thing to look at holistically with the jewelry industry to say, okay, we are regulated by so many different federal agencies and they don't agree with each other on how it should work.
Thank you, sir. Exactly what I was going to say. The idea of the original origin is the only origin that counts. When we did the appeal to be able to use like refined products as a new rebirth and a new beginning, and were shot down very quickly, that kind of set the tone for what I consider a very unreasonable ruling. But coming back to your question, Lisa, the can kind of suffer the same level of problem and misunderstanding. And we're not all out there policing who's using the word and what way they're using it. So hopefully it's going to be clear enough to the consumer who the good guys are and who they're not.
I'm going to step back from the specific for a moment. Because you've actually led me there, Mark. And I'm going to ask you, as someone who has been a mentor to me and to many others with regard to, I'm going to borrow your phrase, ever better, what prompted your pursuit of and commitment to what I believe you've termed a supply chain with a documented and ethical chain of custody management and clear ethical standards?
Wow. I'm going to kind of go back to what I started talking about a little while ago. So as the chief marketing officer, really, my first and foremost responsibility is corporate reputation. I consider that the highest responsibility. And within Berkshire Hathaway, Warren would consider it the same way. So nothing comes in second to your responsibility, which means, I talked earlier in the very first slides about the glass house, but it means that you establish policies, strategies, and disciplines throughout your entire organization to live in a best practices environment and rules, and that all your associates and eventually, as Ronnie mentioned, your entire supply chain, you try to bring into operating the same way you're expecting, your own people to operate. So for me, it was probably 2005, 2006, being primarily a marketing person at that point in time, as the evolution of best practices and the evolution of sustainability and so forth became stronger. It was pretty clear that I wanted to be sure that A, we were credible and we were doing things, but B, as the communicator, as the marketing communicator, I wanted to make sure that I was telling absolutely the truth about everything in every way. So the two disciplines sort of came into focus for me that I very much wanted to be involved in both. I wanted to be involved in what we do and what we say. And, along the way, there's come along the benefit of, I think Nielsen says 150 billion of sustainable product forecast for this year, something like that in 2021 or 2022. So I do think there became an intersection between your products, your marketing, what they really stand for, how ethical they really are, how they really got made. And I think that's the great storytelling that's going to continue to grow and be enhanced. And I think, Lisa, you referred to the storytelling part. So I think that, yes, the storytelling of doing things the right way is the next great marketing.
So sort of two follow-on questions from that. One, going to the diamond world, because obviously, diamonds are forever, etc. They have a special place psychically. And at the same time, a special place in sort of the discourse. And so in discussing the diamond industry, the World Diamond Council President, Edward Asher, refers to a journey of continuous improvement toward transparency and responsibility in the supply chain. To address the call for greater transparency than is asserted to be achieved with the Kimberley process, the system of warranties has been initiated. What are your thoughts about that system? And what are the next steps in the continuous journey?
Mark, you want to take it? I mean, we're at system warranties. We're in the version 2 now. Is that what you're referring to, Lisa? And by
yes,
the way,
and I'm referring
a leader in this transparency is Edward Asher, the president of the WDC. He is absolutely, has his thoughts in place, and his road is paved with transparency and compliance. That from listening to him speak. The system.
That's why I quoted him. So yeah. I was wondering about the further direction, and because you are closest to that in some ways.
I am, and there's ongoing discussions about it constantly, and we're, I will share with everybody here. For instance, there will be a systems of warranty discussion amongst our team. The round 2, version 2 of it, which all of you, I'm sure, are aware of. Next week, we'll be having further discussions into development and continue to develop. Actually, there's testing going on with the site, continuous testing, and it is going to be brought out there for the entire industry to use. It's, let's put it this way. The system of warranties are in place for those that, number one, aren't a member of the RJC or audited members of the RJC. It's a way for other smaller companies as well as larger companies to participate with sustainability and compliance and transparency. And it's an ongoing, as Edward said, it's an ongoing system. It's constantly being looked at and improved.
Yeah, the only thing is that, you know, add the warranties and add the certifications and add a lot of the things that are happening across various organizations. You know, what we're really saying is that, you know, we, those people that do it, can really demonstrate that the right things have been done against a predetermined set of criteria that have been established with the eventual goal of transparency and truth to the consumer, and that it's going to be able to be found, and it's going to be able to be documented, and a lot of times it's going to be third-party audited. So I think that whether you call them warranties or call them certifications, you know, I think one of the first sentences Lisa said in this whole thing was trust and verify. That I think that is where we are, and this is an important journey that Edward's talking about.
And it's a continued. So Peter Karakachev of Alrosa is really the lead when it came to redeveloping the system and updating the system of warranties to today's standards. And I find it really gratifying that when you look at the system of warranties in its current, you have companies like Signet that are involved, and you have companies like De Beers that are involved, and Alrosa that are involved, plus smaller companies to bring it to you, to make sure that this system of warranties version 2 applies for all in the industry, from large to small. So, you know, Lisa, I think, Ed, your quote from Edward says it all, quite frankly. And it's an ongoing project, constantly being improved and looked at.
Are there additional steps that might be outside of what we're defining as the warranties? I don't know whether it's social actions or I'm not trying to define, but are there additional steps that should be taken to ensure that the diamond industry is what you've termed a, quote, free, open, and transparent marketplace?
Additional steps that we can take. I think we are actively taking the steps that work for everybody.
Yeah, no, I'm not meaning to push you on trial.
But I don't mind. I love answering these things because you know, this is part of being what we're discussing, part of being transparent. So, for instance, let's look at the retailers like Lisa, and what Lisa would request of her suppliers down the line. That's what we look at. And, you know, if you bring something new to us as a supplier, and I'm, you know, us being, okay, let's look at the diamond industry, us being the gold sector, us being your jewelry manufacturers, whatever that is, there's a reason for it when it comes from you. It is because, is it what the consumer is asking of you? Or is it that Lisa Bridge and Ben Bridge are forward thinking and saying, ultimately, the consumer may ask us for this, and we need to be prepared. And that's what we look at constantly. JVC looks at it from a legal side. Richline and Mark does a phenomenal job on the gold side. We like to think we're doing a pretty great job as well on the diamond side. You'll always have those contrary opinions out there. But I think we're all today, in today's world, we are doing a very good job, and we are all forward thinking. And you take somebody again, and you know, as you well know, Edward is a very close friend of mine, so not just to toot his horn, but he is an absolute phenomenal leader when it comes to this. Absolutely phenomenal. So
I think the one thing I'd add to that, Lisa, is that, and Ronnie points out all the good points, is that as an industry, we're becoming around the concept of responsibility and responsible practice. We're becoming less siloed. You know, there's a lot more level of collaboration and some harmonization from diamonds to gold and so forth. But the idea of having an industry, you know, where the rising tide raises all ships, where we're getting enough significant participation, and Lisa and Ronnie says right. Eventually, retailers will drive the train. But this is now not just a conversation. I mean, this is a strong movement with very good leaders and lots of very good work being done.
Absolutely. Well said, Mark.
Yes.
You know, interestingly enough, look at the collaboration today between the WDC and the RJC, the cross membership. It's all about this. It's all about everything we've discussed.
And one thing I will say is, I think, germane to Lisa's question, one of the things that the industry has been working on for many, many years is expanding the definition of conflict diamond at the Kimberley process. And, despite the fact that globally there are some roadblocks to this, it has been a constant position of the industry and US government that it needs to be expanded. This is not a holdup from this side of this side of the globe. Everybody here is invested in broadening that definition to ensure that human rights abuses are not part of our diamond supply chain. So of course, everything that the industry is doing, in addition to the KP, is incredibly vitally important. But fundamentally, I think the ultimate goal is to get that into the KP.
Well said, Sarah. There's going to be a big push this year to change the definition. What'll happen? We'll see. But there will be a big push. And what was stated amongst everybody here, Mark, you said it correctly. Everybody's collaborating together now. So that goes for countries as well. Countries that benefit from the diamond industry know that today they have to be more forward thinking as well. So companies that in the past, that Sarah can tell you all about, or countries, excuse me, not companies, that were against changing the definitions for something as silly as the reasons we were given, believe it or not. What happens if somebody gets into a fight in my factory? Does that mean there's, some sort of human rights abuse there? I'm not joking you. That was actually brought up. And, people are just really not focused on what and why we are changing the definition today and putting in human rights abuses. What I love seeing is over a period of time now, those countries that didn't want to see change are now saying, we agree with you. So the numbers are less and less. The problem that we have is that the voting at KP is by consensus. That means if one country votes against the definition, the vote is knocked down. So it's 100% or the vote doesn't go through. So let's keep our fingers crossed that maybe this will be the year that we can get it changed. But regardless of the change or not, as an industry, we stand by the definition.
Well, I think that's been one of the interesting things. That was one of the interesting things when there was discussion about Dodd-Frank, is the commitment to stand by some of the ethical changes, no matter what happened. And so that has led me to my last couple of questions, because we have a robust group of questions from the audience. So one thing I would love to ask Mark is, what is the relationship between increased transparency in the supply chain? We've talked about things, for example, sourced here, cut here, made here, as an example. What is the relationship between that increased transparency and actual systemic and structural change? And following on to that would be, what role does blockchain play in that?
I thought you were going to ask me how we solve world hunger next.
That's
good
for
question,
dessert.
Lisa. A lot of us, not just me, I'm very driven and excited by all the new technologies, and I get very excited and jump on these things pretty quickly. Yeah. But the idea of chain of custody is not new. And really, that although we now talk blockchain, and because of all its notoriety in cyber currencies and everything else, and it's a great technology, really, we've been doing something similar with technology called String since 2005, 2006, which basically is a map of the supply chain and with transparency. And you were able to, at a store, key in the number and bring up a Google map showing every place it touched and drill down and see why is that a responsible node in this supply chain. So these things can be done. And it's coming stronger and stronger now in terms of how important that verify part is, that Lisa referred to. But I think all this starts, with your process and everyone's process and what they do for due diligence and how they manage, all their third-party relationships and how they manage their supply chain and what they insist that they get from information. So, I can speak from us a little bit that we no longer just have a vendor agreement, but we have a full online program learning training course on code of ethics and conduct for our suppliers that we've built in a very transparent communication system for them to communicate up and down on every little issue, from materials to supplies and more demands on understanding more about human rights. That I'd say that utilizing technology and blockchain has gigantic potential, and there are a couple of people that have done it much better than we in Everledger and Tracer, which is De Beers thing, and bringing it down to a level. It isn't easy. It can be done, and it doesn't matter what you call it. It's good documentation with great due diligence, great follow-up, and back to, I think you Sarah, or Lisa, you said, know your counterparty. And the discipline is, I'm on a path. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to measure everything I can. I'm going to report on it. I'm going to put it in my portal, and I'm going to have that information ready for next time along, or for whoever downstream wants to know. And I'm going to be transparent about it. So I still believe in blockchain. We found it difficult to administer throughout the supply chain with so many nodes and subcontractors and suppliers, and particularly all the way back to the origin point of view. So we're still doing it in a more limited way, learning. But the chain of custody and the chain of custody documentation has never been more robust than it is now. And the insistence on due diligence all the way up and down that chain is really the key to success.
So 2 questions. One to Lisa. So Mark has this fantastic, not just construct, but commitment and process. And perhaps someone comes to a Benbridge store and makes a request for something. What do you feel, or do you feel that there is a connection for the consumer and for the person interacting with the consumer to the everything that Mark, if you will, has just talked to or spoken about, if you will, that has to do with the aggregation of all of this information? Does this enhance a story? Does this achieve greater trust or give more confidence? Sort of, do you feel that there are kind of tangible relationships and benefits?
I do. I think that it depends on the customer how far they want to go with that information. But I think we have to arm our people, our associates, with as much as we can, and to tell that story. I mean, 2 things that I think about. One is, we were having a recent conversation I was having with someone on my team. We were talking about RJC. We have our renewal audit coming up this year. And so we're talking about it. And they asked me, has a customer ever come in and asked if we were a member of the RJC? And I said, I've never heard, but I can't imagine that they have. But we do it because it's the right thing to do. And we do it because we hold ourselves to a higher standard. And because it makes sure that we're checking all of the boxes, that we're thinking of all the things that we wouldn't have thought of, both the complex supply chain, but also, are we doing fire drills? Okay, we have smoke detectors. When was the last time we checked them? Those are really important things to do. And it's really helpful to have someone to hold us to those standards to say, oh yeah, we did. Okay, we need a better, let's make sure we have a process for checking that the smoke detectors are all in working order. Those are really important. And so is the customer going to come in and ask the specific question, are we members? Probably not. But can we tell them that we care about our people? Can we tell them about that we choose to go above and beyond because it's the right thing to do? I think that we have that imperative. And also, we want to educate our people to the best of our ability to understand, to understand on a deep level where things are coming from. So I mentioned Botswana. I led a group of associates. We took a dozen of us to Botswana to go and trace the journey of a diamond. And what more powerful thing to say from an associate standing at a counter to be able to say, I saw where diamonds come from. I saw the impact that they're having. Let me tell you a genuine story, not just let me read off of something that I heard in a training, but here's my experience. And I think that's so powerful to be able to share. And so I think that all of those pieces go hand in hand when we're communicating with our customers, because it comes from a genuine place. It comes from, here are our values, here's what we're living, and here's my experience.
Would
Yeah,
love
one
to
more
have
thing
been
there,
on
Lisa,
that trip.
The storytelling part is the must. The technology isn't really the interest for the consumer. It's the story. It's the point by point. What happened there? How did it happen? And how is that romantic? The ability to use the technology as simply the schematic to write your story. That's really where the benefits are going to come. And people younger and smarter than I are going to be utilizing virtual reality and augmented reality and many, many other things to take every one of these nodes, which we right now call a spot in our chain of custody. They're going to use these nodes to tell stories all the way up and down and involve people and let people see where their diamond actually came out of the ground and let people see where their gold actually was transformed into a ring. And it's the story, I'm back to my marketing roots, but in the end, it's the storytelling that can come from all this that is really going to be the big win for our industry.
Agree with you, Mark. And that's what we were sadly lacking for some time, was the storytelling. And more, as Lisa just said, that she's telling her story, and Mark and their story, more and more the good stories are coming out of how good the diamond industry really is and the good work that we all do. So whether it's the diamond industry or the gold, and that story needs to be told, and how we benefit, people around the world. And yes, we benefit ourselves as well. Let's face it. But the benefits that we bring are enormous.
Okay, so Lisa, no, sorry, not Lisa, forgive me. Sarah, last question before we go to questions, which we will do with great expediency. Storytelling. How does the FTC's ongoing vigilance regarding the relationship between celebrities, influencers, and consumers and brands relate to transparency? And do you have any practical suggestions for any of the respective parties regarding proper practice?
Yes, thank you. So to sum us all up, the FTC regulates clarity in influencer marketing and in brand marketing. So if businesses are working with influencers and they are getting paid to talk about products, that has to be clearly disclosed. Whether that's on social media or in an interview or anything like that, they have to disclose that they have been compensated, or they have been gifted something. You can use a hashtag ad or hashtag sponsored, but the FTC has been pretty clear that those disclosures need to be clear and conspicuous. So you can't just say hashtag spawn. That is not enough to get to a consumer the fact that you have been compensated for your time. And, on Instagram, for example, in the caption for Instagram, sometimes only the first line or two is visible in the caption. You have to click to expand it. The FTC has made it very clear that your disclosure, that is a sponsored post or something like that, must come in those first few lines before a consumer has to click to expand that. So again, it's all about being clear. Consumers make decisions. It is very, very clear that consumers make decisions based on influencers and celebrities and things like that. And so those decisions, if they have been materially influenced, really need to be clear about that, about that sponsorship or things like that. I can tell you on a personal note, my best friend, runs an Instagram account with her kid and gets lots of products sent to them. And not a few times have I said to her, hey, you didn't do this right. You got to make sure that you do the sponsored on the front part. And she said, oh, great. The brand didn't tell me that. So it is not just the responsibility of the influencer or, celebrity themselves to make those disclosures. It is also on the brand to make sure that the people that they are working with are doing the disclosures correctly. And if you're working with somebody who isn't willing to do that, that's not the right person.
So now to the questions. I am going to combine two of them from Shannon Bagby, who is effectively asking about gold. These questions, we have two questions about what kind of stakeholders wanted the FTC to lower the gold content and still call it gold. Who wanted that change? And then a comment that it burns my butter big time.
Sure, it's very easy. The businesses that make those products wanted it. There are some businesses out there who make low carat gold alloys. They wanted to be able to use the term gold when they were doing so. Most of the industry opposed it. Unfortunately, we lost.
Can I just add one thing? I think that a lot of the discussion, as Sarah summarized quickly, is that it came down to, not can we do it, but should we do it? And, to me, you heard me say this earlier, this was as much about the brand name Carat Gold and what that connotation was after all these many centuries to the consumer as it was about the amount of gold actually in the product. And yes, those that put forth the proposition felt it was the democratic thing to do, that as long as you said how much was in it, that was fair. And the FTC sided with them. So completely different, we were on totally different sides of transparency in that particular issue.
So a question from Stuart Poole. How can you know that a diamond or gemstone is ethically or responsibly sourced without knowing which country or mine it came from?
I'll take it in general. Origin is really a tough issue. And there's an awful lot of discussion about origin. Even our State Department's talking about origin. And Ronnie, you were there. And Sarah, you were there. They pulled a bunch of us together and said that we're going to hold this industry responsible all the way back to the origin of their products. That mention origin to your attorney or your CFO, and it shivers, because knowing where the diamond came from the first time, all the way back to before anything happened, the same thing with a gram of gold, this is pretty much not going to happen. And, it's horrible to have to say it that way, but in very specifics, yes, to some extent possible. Can it be tracked and traced a little bit? Yes. We're not economically built for this level of detail all the way along the way, especially unless people upstream start getting rewards more in terms of having the money to actually become part of this. And then that's going to get multiplied all the way back to the consumer. And that's a death spiral in terms of cost and increased prices. So I think that, even looking at things like the blockchain, it's more important to me to know who I'm dealing with right, than to know that every little thing happened perfectly all the way along the line. And I think, that's what we're in an industry of. We're still an industry of a handshake. We're still an industry of looking each other in the eye. We're still an industry of trusting each other. And I don't think you can legislate that.
So our final question is actually to each of us. You can, based on the time, we get like one sentence. But the question comes from Michelle Vogel. There's a universal link between all the panelists, jewelry. And effectively what she would like to know is what drew us to it, or how did we get to it? And this literally is the last question, but I think it's such an interesting one that I'd like to close with that. And perhaps Lisa, you would go first.
So I'm fortunate to be 5th generation in this business, but I feel like I also got to choose it. My parents said, find what you're passionate about and go and pursue it. And there's just nothing better than this business. It's joy and it's beauty and it's memory and it's meaning. And what more could you possibly want?
Ronnie?
So for me, I'd skipped a generation. My grandfathers in Europe were both in the diamond industry. In fact, started out the same way I did, as a diamond sawyer, dividing the rough. My parents were in a totally different business. I, being a motorhead that I am, for those of you that know me, and motorcyclist and everything else, when I was a young teenager, close friends of my parents asked if I could come to work for them over the summer. They had a diamond sawing shop here on 47th Street. I fell in love with the business that early. So after school, I came into the diamond industry, ultimately went on my own. And I always used to say, I wish this business would love me as much as I love it. But I love getting up every morning and I love doing what I do.
Sarah?
So I come from a bit of a different perspective. I have no jewelry in the bloodline that I know of. But I came to the jewelry industry from law school, which I went to law school because I wanted to protect the work of artists. I had worked in music licensing before law school and cared so much about the music industry and about protecting creators and songwriters. And that has really translated into a love of this job where I get to help not just protect creative people and protect their work, but also to ensure that they are protected from, unnecessary lawsuits and dealing with problems that arise when you don't focus on legal compliance. So for me, it's the joy of, watching creators do their work, but also making sure that everybody understands what is expected of them to have a transparent and healthy business.
Mark?
I have a very standard path. I'm an aeronautical engineer that was working with NASA, and I met this guy at a cocktail party who was the CEO of a company that owned Cartier, Blackstar, and Gorham, and so forth at that point in time. And he said, "You seem like a reasonably bright young guy. Why don't you come as my assistant and I'll double your salary?" Poof! Instant generational change to the jewelry business.
Well, in my case, I come to it from the world of visual culture and objects. And jewelry sums up good, better, best. What is it made of? Where does it come from? What does it mean to the maker? What does it mean to culture and society, and how transformative it is? And so at the end of the day, swept my heart away. And I want to, since we're so tight on time, I want to express my heartfelt thanks to each of you for joining us as part of the panel. Thank you to all of you who sent in questions and who spent this time with us. And I promise you, we will revisit another term and hopefully demonstrate that it is vital, alive, and dynamic as language and this industry or business pursuit is. Thank you very, very much. And I hope you're enjoying brighter light and longer days. Warmest thanks to each of you.
Thank you, Lisa. Stay safe and healthy, everybody out there.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Keep being
Bye.
passionate about this.